The smell of burning flesh filled the barracks before anyone could scream. Jungkook's hand trembled as he stared at the curling smoke rising from his palm, the seared skin blistering in grotesque patterns that looked almost deliberate, like a symbol carved by fate. The metallic tang of blood mingled with the acrid scent of singed leather. The air was heavy, thick, almost alive. Outside, the icy wind of the military base howled like a warning. "Medic!" "Now!" someone shouted, but Jungkook didn't hear them. His heartbeat was too loud, thundering in his ears like a drumline out of rhythm. The world was spinning, his vision tunneling into darkness except for the flame. The same flame he thought he had extinguished years ago. He had told himself that enlisting would be a kind of cleansing. Away from the flashing cameras, from the deafening chants of Jungkook. Jungkook, that blurred into white noise. Here, among soldiers stripped of fame and privilege, he wanted to be nameless. Just another man in uniform. But fear, he realized, had followed him. Not of war, not of pain, but of himself. The doctor's voice sliced through the fog. "It's deep, second degree at least." "How did this happen?" Jungkook opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat burned, the way his hand did. He wanted to say it was an accident during night training, that the oil lamp had fallen, that it was nothing. But the image of the fire flickered in his mind, replaying the moment that wasn't supposed to exist. Someone had whispered his name just before the explosion that he remembered that voice. Low. Familiar. Impossible. That night, he couldn't sleep. The bandages around his hand itched under the fluorescent lights of the infirmary. The ceiling hummed faintly with electricity. He could hear the rhythmic breathing of other soldiers, the rustle of blankets, the faint buzz of an old heater. Yet beneath it all, there was something else, something moving quietly, as if crawling beneath his skin. His hand throbbed, each pulse dragging him deeper into memory. A stage, a spotlight, a fan scream turning into a shriek. The smell of smoke again, back then, from the pyrotechnics that had malfunctioned during a concert in Tokyo. That night, he had felt the same heat, the same fear. And he had seen someone watching him from the side of the stage. A shadow with eyes that gleamed red under the flames. He thought it had been a dream. Now, in the barracks, that same presence hovered at the edge of his vision. When he blinked, it vanished. But when he exhaled, he could swear he heard breathing that wasn't his. During training, the burn limited his movement. The commander was strict but cautious, keeping Jungkook away from physical drills until the wound healed. It should have been a relief. But isolation bred something worse, silence. And in that silence, memories began to talk. That he started hearing echoes of old lyrics in his mind. But the words twisted, the meanings darkened. My time is burning away. The songs that once gave him comfort now mocked him. Each melody was a reminder of who he used to be, a boy chasing light, only to find himself standing too close to the fire point one evening. As he sat by the window watching snow fall over the base, another soldier approached, Lieutenant Seo, a quiet man with sharp eyes and a scar across his cheek. He leaned against the wall beside Jungkook and spoke without looking at him. "They say wounds tell stories," Seo murmured. "But yours looks like a warning." Jungkook turned to him, startled. "What do you mean?" Seo's gaze was cold, almost pitying. "Some men are burned from the outside, others from within." Then he walked away, leaving Jungkook with 1,000 questions and one unbearable truth. He didn't remember lighting that lamp. Days passed, and the burn refused to heal properly. The doctor found no infection, yet the skin remained raw, almost alive, as if something pulsed beneath it. During the night, Jungkook began to dream of fire swallowing his dorm, his stage, his past. In one dream, he saw himself standing in uniform before a mirror, saluting, while his reflection smiled back with charred lips. He woke up screaming. When morning came, rumors began to spread. Other soldiers whispered that Jungkook talked in his sleep, muttering names, apologizing to people no one had ever heard of. They said his room smelled faintly of smoke, though no matches were allowed inside. The military psychologist called him in, gently asking about his fears, his memories, his faith. Jungkook tried to explain that it wasn't just trauma. It felt like something was following him. Watching, waiting, maybe it's guilt, the psychologist said softly. Sometimes the past burns longer than the fire itself. But when Jungkook looked down at his bandaged hand, He saw faint black letters seared into his skin beneath the gauze. Letters that hadn't been there before. They spelled one word. Remembered, he tore off the bandage, gasping, the letters already fading like smoke and wind. The doctor swore it was impossible. But deep inside, Jungkook knew. The burn wasn't just an accident. It was a message. And someone, somewhere in the shadows of his own memory, wanted him to read it. He pressed his trembling hand against his chest, feeling the heat rise again, and whispered to himself, voice cracking like broken glass. I thought the fire was gone. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the flame began to burn again. The whisper beneath the ashes, the snow had not stopped for 3 days, and neither had the whispers. Jungkook sat on the edge of his bunk, his bandaged hand resting on his knee, his eyes fixed on the frost gathering along the window pane. The world outside looked still, silent, pure, everything he was not. Inside the barracks, the air smelled of damp wool, sweat, and something faintly metallic, like rust or old blood that he hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the same whisper, a low, intimate voice curling through the darkness, breathing against his ear like smoke. Do you remember me? He didn't, but his body reacted as if he should. His pulse raced, the burn throbbed in rhythm, and his skin prickled with cold sweat. At dawn, the door creaked open. Lieutenant Seo entered, snowflakes melting on his shoulders. His gaze swept the room, calm and precise, until it landed on Jungkook. You're coming with me, he said quietly. They walked through the base's back corridor, past the kitchen where soldiers were chopping vegetables for breakfast, past the mess hall that smelled faintly of cabbage and miso. The sound of boots crunching on icy concrete echoed around them. Jungkook didn't ask where they were going. He didn't need to. He could feel the tension crawling between them like static. Seo led him to an old storage building at the edge of the camp, its walls cracked, its roof sagging under the snow. The door groaned open to reveal a dim room filled with old uniforms, oil drums, and a single metal chair beneath a hanging bulb. Sit, Seo ordered. Jungkook hesitated but obeyed. The chair was cold against his skin, the air thick with dust, and the faint scent of gasoline. You said you don't remember how the fire started, Seo began, his voice steady but his eyes sharp. But you were the only one near the lamp, the only one awake. I told you, Jungkook said, his voice low, controlled. I heard something before it happened. A voice. Seo tilted his head slightly. A voice. Yes. And what did it say? Jungkook swallowed. My name. Silence. Only the hum of the light bulb filled the space. Seo crossed his arms, the scar on his cheek tightening as he studied him. You ever think it might have been your own voice? Jungkook looked up sharply. What are you trying to say? I'm saying, Seo said quietly, stepping closer, that fear can make a man see ghosts where there are none. And guilt can make him start fires he doesn't remember lighting. Jungkook's breath hitched. You think I did this to myself? I think, Seo said, his tone colder now. You're hiding something. Something that's burning you from the inside out. Before Jungkook could reply, the light flickered violently. The bulb buzzed, then burst, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, everything was silent except for the distant wind. Then came the sound, soft, deliberate footsteps circling them. Who's there? Seo barked, hand reaching for his sidearm. No answer. The air grew hotter, suffocating. Jungkook's bandaged hand began to sear again, glowing faintly beneath the fabric as if the fire was alive under his skin. The whisper returned, closer this time, curling around his mind. You left me in the dark, Jungkook. He gasped, clutching his hand. No, I didn't. Seo turned toward him. What did you say? I heard it again, Jungkook whispered, trembling. It said I left it behind. Seo's expression hardened. Left what behind? Jungkook looked up, eyes wide, haunted. Someone. A sudden crash echoed from the far corner, metal clattering, a shadow darting past. Seo drew his gun, flashlight cutting through the dark, revealing nothing but dust swirling in the beam. When the lights finally came back on, the air smelled faintly of smoke. On the wall behind Jungkook, written in black ash, was a single word, stay. Seo's face went pale. Who did this? But Jungkook didn't answer. He was staring at his hand. The bandage had burned away, revealing fresh blisters, and beneath them, the faint outline of another word forming in his skin, forgive. That night, Jungkook refused to return to the barracks. He stayed awake in the infirmary, the hum of machines and distant footsteps keeping him tethered to reality. His thoughts swirled, memories of the Tokyo fire, of fans screaming, of someone's face lost in the chaos. A name hovered at the edge of memory, too faint to grasp. He picked up a small notebook and began to write, trying to trace back the flashes that haunted him. The letters on his hand pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of his pen strokes. He wrote, I saw someone in the flames. I think I knew them. I think I let them die. The ink bled across the paper, spreading like smoke. He dropped the pen, breathing heavily. The room dimmed, the edges of his vision softening. And then, in the reflection of the infirmary window, he saw her, standing behind him. A woman, face half-burned, eyes filled with sorrow and fury. She opened her mouth, and in a voice that was both human and not, she whispered the same words he'd seen on the wall, stay. Jungkook turned, but the room was empty. Only the faint smell of ash lingered. When morning came, Lieutenant Seo found Jungkook asleep at the desk, the notebook open, his burned hand resting on the page. But where he had written before, the words were gone, erased completely. Only a single line remained, written in a hand that was not his. You promised me the light. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. But inside Jungkook's chest, the storm was only beginning to rise. Beneath the frozen lake, Jungkook's haunting visions lead him to the frozen lake, where a buried memory resurfaces, and the line between the living and the dead begins to fracture. The ice screamed before it shattered. Jungkook barely had time to react before the ground beneath him gave way, plunging him into the lake's black water. The cold hit him like knives, slicing through flesh and bone. His lungs locked, panic clawing at his chest as he sank deeper into the freezing dark. Above, the fractured ice blurred into distant light, refracted like broken glass. He kicked, gasping, but the water was thick, heavy, alive. Something brushed against his leg. Then again. Fingers, cold and impossibly soft, curling around his ankle. He tried to scream, but his mouth filled with water. Through the murky dark, a face appeared before him. Pale, familiar. Heron. Her eyes glowed faintly gold, her hair floating like ribbons of smoke. She reached out, her burned hand pressing against his chest. You left me, she whispered, her voice echoing not through the water, but inside his skull. You said you'd bring me light. Jungkook's heart convulsed. The world tilted, his body twisting, his lungs bursting. He thought of the concert, the smoke, the moment the flames swallowed her scream. He remembered running toward the stage, then stopping, frozen by terror. And then, blackness. That he woke on the shore, coughing up water, his hands clawing at the frozen ground. The snow around him steamed faintly, as if his body were burning from within. His uniform clung to him, soaked and stiff with ice. The shadow loomed over him. Lieutenant Seo. What the hell were you doing out here? Seo barked, his voice breaking through the roaring in Jungkook's ears. Jungkook could barely speak. The lake. She was. Seo grabbed his collar, shaking him. Who? Who was there? Jungkook stared into Seo's eyes. Heron. Seo froze. The grip on Jungkook's collar loosened. For the first time since Jungkook had met him, Seo looked shaken. He took a step back. That name, where did you hear it? Jungkook blinked through the haze. I knew her. Before. She was in the accident. Seo's voice dropped to a whisper. You shouldn't remember that. Jungkook's breath caught. What do you mean? But Seo didn't answer. He turned, staring out over the lake, jaw clenched, as if deciding something. Finally, he said quietly, Come with me. The interrogation room was dim, the single lights swinging gently overhead. Seo stood by the door, arms crossed, watching Jungkook as he shivered under a blanket. She was an assistant dancer, Seo said finally. Stationed with the pyrotechnic team on your world tour 3 years ago. When the accident happened, the report said the cause was a malfunction. But the footage disappeared before the investigation concluded. Jungkook's pulse quickened. Footage? Seo nodded. Every camera recording from that concert. Wiped clean within an hour of the explosion. Someone didn't want it seen. Jungkook's mouth went dry. Why? That's what I've been trying to find out, Seo said, eyes narrowing. You think you were drafted randomly? You think it's coincidence you ended up at this base? This wasn't an accident, Jungkook. Someone wanted you isolated. The words sank like lead. Who? Before Seo could answer, the lights flickered. A cold wind swept through the room, though every window was sealed. The shadows along the walls shifted, stretching, twisting, taking shape. Jungkook's breath hitched. From the corner of the room, a voice whispered, "He knows the truth." Seo spun around, gun raised. "Who's there?" The air rippled. Jungkook felt a searing pain in his hand again, the burn blazing beneath the bandage, the letters pulsing like fireflies. "Forgive. Stay." "Remember." The shadows melted back into the walls. The light steadied. Seo lowered his gun slowly. His voice trembled just slightly. "She's attached to you." Jungkook pressed his hand to his chest. "She died because of me." "Maybe," Seo said. "Or maybe she died for you." That night, Jungkook couldn't sleep. He sat on his bunk, the barracks quiet except for the soft breathing of the others. The air smelled faintly of burnt oil. He unwrapped the bandage from his hand, watching the skin pulse faintly with orange light beneath the blisters. That he thought of Heron, the girl whose laughter used to echo backstage, who had always hummed melodies under her breath. He remembered her obsession with fire, how she said it was beautiful because it could destroy and illuminate at once. "We'll burn bright together," she'd said once, smiling. "Promise me." He had promised. He didn't realize until now that maybe she had taken it literally. Jungkook pulled the notebook from under his pillow. There were new words again, written in that same, impossible hand. He lied. "Check the archive." His pulse raced. He knew what it meant. The military kept old surveillance records in the archive room beneath headquarters. Access was restricted, but Seo had a pass. He slipped out of the barracks quietly, his boots silent on the frozen ground. The base was asleep, the guard towers dim under the fog. Inside the archive building, the air was dry and metallic. Rows of old computers blinked faintly in the dark. Jungkook moved quickly, searching until he found the file name that matched the concert's date, Tokyo_0211, but he inserted a flash drive, copying the data. The monitor flickered. A video opened, static. Then, images, the concert stage. Jungkook performing. The fire erupting too early. Chaos. Screams. And then, something he had never seen before. The flame had started from behind the stage. Someone had lit it. Someone wearing a military jacket. The screen glitched, freezing on a single frame. The man's face was blurred, but the shape of the scar across his cheek was unmistakable. Lieutenant Seo. Jungkook's blood turned to ice. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him. He turned slowly and saw Seo standing in the doorway, his face hidden in shadow. "Curiosity," Seo said softly, "can be dangerous." Jungkook took a step back. "Why?" Seo's expression hardened. "Because some fires were never meant to be extinguished." The power went out, and in the blackness, Jungkook felt that now familiar heat rise again, his hand burning, his breath catching, and Heron's whisper curling around him like smoke. "The truth burns, Jungkook. The world filled with fire. The shadow that wears my face as the truth about the fire surfaces." Jungkook faces betrayal, buried guilt, and a haunting revelation, one that blurs the line between reality and the ghosts of his past. The room was burning again. Jungkook stumbled through the smoke, coughing, his lungs screaming for air. The walls of the archive flickered with orange light as flames climbed the shelves like hungry serpents. Papers curled into ash. Metal screamed as it bent. Somewhere in the chaos, he heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling him. "Seo." Jungkook shouted, his voice hoarse. "Why are you doing this?" The answer came from the dark. "Because you were never supposed to remember." Jungkook turned toward the voice, eyes stinging from the smoke. Seo stepped into view, the firelight carving deep shadows into his scarred face. His expression was calm, too calm. "She's gone, Jungkook," Seo said. "You buried her, and the world moved on. You were meant to, too." Jungkook's breath came in sharp bursts. "You lit that fire. You killed her." Seo didn't flinch. "I saved you." The words hit harder than the heat. Jungkook froze. "What are you talking about?" Seo took another step closer, his silhouette warping in the light. "She wanted to burn the stage that night, to make you feel what she felt. Your fame, your guilt, your shame, all of it turned to ash. You were her muse, Jungkook, but you were also her revenge." Jungkook shook his head, backing away. No, that's not true. You think ghosts appear without reason. Seo's voice rose now, raw, almost desperate. She clung to you because you let her die without trying to stop her. The flames roared higher, and Jungkook's hand ignited again, blinding pain searing through his skin. He screamed, clutching his palm. Through the pain, a new word burned itself into his flesh, glowing like molten gold, truth. That Heron's voice filled the air. He's lying. Seo's eyes flickered, his hand reaching for his gun. Don't listen to her. The shadows behind him began to move, shifting, forming her outline. Heron stepped out from the smoke, her burned cheek glistening, her eyes bright and unblinking. The fire didn't touch her. It moved around her, bowing like it recognized its creator. You tried to erase me, she said softly, looking at Seo. You killed yourself. Seo shouted. You dragged him into your madness. Jungkook's head spun. The fire, the noise, the impossible collision of memories. He looked from Seo to Heron, his pulse thundering in his ears. Tell me the truth, he gasped. What really happened that night? Heron turned to him. You remember the promise, don't you? That we'd shine together, no matter what it cost. She reached out her hand. Flames flickered between her fingers, dancing like tiny suns. You wanted to stop the show, she whispered. But I wanted the world to see you burn bright, forever. You said you'd give everything for your art. Her smile trembled. So I gave you fire. Jungkook staggered back, shaking. The memories struck all at once. Her laughter, the concert, the explosion. He had begged her to end the stunt, but she had refused. He'd seen her by the pyrotechnic switch, smiling at him as she lit the spark that he had run toward her, but Seo had grabbed him, dragging him back just before the stage erupted. Seo had saved his life. But Heron had burned for his dream. The truth twisted in his chest like a knife. That Heron's voice softened. You forgot me because you couldn't bear the guilt. But you can't silence what you owe. Stop, Jungkook pleaded, tears stinging his eyes. Please, stop. Seo moved between them, raising the gun. You don't belong here, he shouted at the ghost. Heron's face changed. Her expression, once sorrowful, now cracked open with fury. The flames around her flared into a storm, swirling violently through the room. You took him from me, she hissed. You turned my fire into his nightmare. She raised her hands. The air exploded. The fire swallowed the walls, devouring everything in its path. Jungkook was thrown back, his body slamming against the metal door. The last thing he saw before the world went white was Heron's face. Half angel, half inferno, and Seo's silhouette vanishing into the blaze. When Jungkook opened his eyes, he was in a hospital bed. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, mixed with something faintly sweet, lavender. He blinked, his vision blurred, pain radiating through his body. His hand was bandaged again, the skin beneath still throbbing faintly with heat. Welcome back. The voice was soft. He turned his head and saw the military psychologist sitting beside him. The man's expression was calm, but his eyes betrayed something else, fear. What happened? Jungkook rasped. There was a fire, the doctor said quietly. You were found unconscious near the archive building. Lieutenant Seo is missing. Jungkook swallowed hard. Missing? They think he ran, the doctor said. There's talk of an investigation. Jungkook stared at the ceiling. The memories swirled like smoke in his head. The fire, the truth, the ghost. He didn't know what was real anymore. That night, when the lights dimmed, he sat up slowly and looked at his hand. The pain was gone, but the letters had changed again. This time, they didn't form a word. They formed a symbol, the shape of a flame, but shaped like an eye. He reached for his notebook on the bedside table. It was still there, though the pages were charred at the edges. When he opened it, one new sentence had appeared in that same delicate handwriting. One burns to forget. The other burns to remember. His reflection in the window flickered like a candle's glow. For a heartbeat, it wasn't his own face staring back. It was Heron's. Her lips moved soundlessly. Then the lights in the room went out. The smell of smoke returned, and Jungkook realized he was no longer alone. The mirror of flames as the haunting deepens. Jungkook faces visions that blur truth and delusion, uncovering the sinister connection between Heron's death, Seo's disappearance, and the shadow now wearing his face. The night was silent, but the air smelled of smoke. Jungkook sat in his hospital bed, unmoving. The darkness pressed against the windows, and the faint reflection on the glass shifted, not with his movements, but against them. When he raised his hand, the reflection smiled that Heron's face shimmered through the surface, her burned cheek lit by phantom fire. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You burned with me." Jungkook jerked backward, slamming against the wall. The monitor beside him beeped frantically. His pulse thundered. He blinked once, twice. The reflection was gone. Only his own face stared back, pale and terrified that he reached for the call button, but stopped halfway. He couldn't explain this again, not to the doctors, not to the officers. They already looked at him like he was broken. He looked down at his hand. The burn had cooled, but faint traces of the flame-shaped scar glowed beneath the skin, like embers refusing to die. He whispered into the empty room, "What do you want from me?" The air stirred, and somewhere, faint and distant, came the sound of a woman humming. That same melody, Heron's song. The next morning, the psychologist returned with an officer Jungkook hadn't seen before. Captain Min, his name tag read. His expression was polite but cold, the kind of man who spoke softly and meant everything he said. "Corporal John," Min began, folding his hands on the table. "You've been through significant trauma, but we need clarity about what happened to Lieutenant Seo." Jungkook stared at the tabletop. "He's not dead." Min's brows furrowed. "You saw him?" "No," Jungkook said, voice low. "But I know he's not gone. He can't be." Min studied him for a long moment, then slid a file across the table. "We found this in the ashes of the archive. It's the only intact footage." Jungkook hesitated before opening the folder. Inside was a still frame printed from security footage, the moment before the explosion. Heron stood near the pyrotechnic console. Seo was behind her, and just beside them, barely visible, was a third figure, Jungkook. His breath caught. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible. I wasn't there." Min's eyes were unreadable. "The timestamp doesn't lie." Jungkook felt the world tilt. His throat tightened as the image burned into his mind. "It can't be me. He faltered. Where had he been? The memory, once vivid, began to blur at the edges. The doctor watched him carefully. Trauma can create distortions. Sometimes, we rewrite our past to survive it. Jungkook wanted to believe that. He wanted to think he'd imagined everything. The fire, the ghost, the whispers. But then he felt it again. That faint warmth pulsing through his hand, like something alive beneath the skin. That night, he dreamed again that he was back on stage. The crowd roared, but there were no faces, only a sea of shadows moving in rhythm. The lights dimmed, the smoke thickened. Heron stood center stage, wearing white. Her eyes met his. "You sang my song," she said softly. "What are you?" he whispered. "I'm the part you burned away." The ground beneath them cracked, flames bursting from the floor. Jungkook stumbled back, but Heron didn't move. She smiled, serene. "You thought fire killed me, but it only set me free." She lifted her hand, and suddenly, the fire reflected something. His own face, twisted, screaming, consumed. "Wake up," she whispered. "You're standing where I died." He woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The sheets were damp, the air sharp with the scent of char. He looked down and saw ash on his hands. The following day, he demanded to see the site again. The officers resisted, but his insistence broke through. Captain Min accompanied him to the remains of the archive. Now nothing more than twisted metal and scorched earth. The snow around the foundation had melted into black mud. Steam still rose faintly from the ground. "She's not here," Min said. "Whatever you think you saw, it ended that night." Jungkook crouched, pressing his hand to the earth. It was warm, unnaturally so. His heart pounded as he brushed away the ash, revealing something buried beneath that a pendant. Burned, but still intact, a small locket in the shape of a flame. He remembered it immediately. Heron had worn it every day. When he opened it, he froze. Inside was a photograph of himself that a younger Jungkook, smiling, head bent toward the camera. On the back, written in looping handwriting, "For when you forget the fire that made you." The wind howled through the ruins. Min stared down at the locket, then at Jungkook. Where did that come from? But Jungkook couldn't answer. His hand burned again, light spilling from the cracks in his skin. The locket grew hot in his palm until he dropped it, and it sank into the mud, hissing as if alive. "Step back," Min shouted, reaching for him. But Jungkook was transfixed. The earth beneath the locket began to pulse, glowing faintly red, like an ember buried in soil. And then a voice rose, not from around them, but from beneath. "He's wearing my face now." Jungkook's body went cold. He turned slowly toward the ruins of the corridor, and for an instant, just an instant, he saw Co standing there, watching him. But Co's face wasn't his OWN.IT was Jungkook's. That night, alone in the infirmary, Jungkook stared into the mirror. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above him. His reflection stared back. Blank, exhausted, he whispered, "Who am I?" For a moment, the reflection didn't answer. Then, slowly, it smiled, and in Heron's voice, it said, "The one who burned me." The mirror cracked. Jungkook stumbled back, shards falling at his feet. His reflection fractured into 100 flames, each one flickering with his face, and hers, merged, inseparable. In the reflection's broken glow, his burn began to pulse again, and beneath the skin, he saw something moving. Not flame, not flesh, something alive. The Song of Ashes. In the haunting finale, Jungkook confronts the truth behind the fire, the ghost of Heron, and the monstrous reflection that wears his face. One final reckoning between love, guilt, and redemption. The snow fell in slow, soundless flakes over the ruins. Jungkook stood where the archive once burned, his military coat open to the cold, the mark on his hand glowing faintly beneath the pale moonlight. The world around him was quiet, save for the low hum of the wind through twisted steel. Captain Min's voice echoed in his mind. "You have to let it go, John. Whatever you think you owe her, it's killing you." But Jungkook knew now, it wasn't guilt that killed. It was silence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the burned locket. The glass inside was cracked, but Heron's face was still visible, smiling through the damage. For weeks he had tried to deny what the fire whispered, but every night, the truth returned with her voice. He knelt and pressed the locket to the ground. "I'm here," he murmured. "I remember now." The earth beneath him shivered. The ashes stirred, forming faint ripples that glowed like molten veins. From within the ground, a sound rose, the faint hum of her song. The same melody he'd heard in dreams, the one that used to guide them during rehearsal nights, now warped and ancient. That he closed his eyes. "I know you're here, Heron." The air grew thick, charged with warmth. The snow melted in a circle around him, steam curling upward. When he opened his eyes, she stood there. Heron, her figure half translucent, her eyes calm but burning with light. "Why did you come back?" she asked. Jungkook's voice trembled. "Because I couldn't let the lie end with you." Her expression softened, though her tone remained sharp. "You lied to them. You lied to yourself. You think remembering will set you free." "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "The day of the fire, I thought I could control it. It was supposed to be a symbol, rebirth. You said you trusted me." Her voice echoed, overlapping with the crackle of unseen flame. "And I did, until you lit the match." The wind rose, carrying the smell of smoke. The ruins flickered alive for an instant, walls reforming in light and shadow. Jungkook found himself standing once again inside the archive as it had been, intact, shimmering, alive. Heron walked toward the console, her white uniform gleaming. That he could see it now. The moment everything broke. The system overload. His hand hesitating over the emergency control. CO shouting his name. And then the spark. That he had seen it before, but never remembered the look in Heron's eyes. Not fear, but disappointment. Just before the blast consumed them. That he fell to his knees. "I didn't want it to happen like that. I thought the effect would stop. I thought that you could control fire," she finished, her voice like the rustle of burning leaves. "But fire never obeys love or guilt." He raised his head. "Then why are you still here?" Heron looked down at him, and for the first time, her face softened completely. "Because you're still burning." The vision shifted. The world collapsed back into ash and ruin. Jungkook's burn flared painfully, his body trembling as light poured from his hand, crawling up his arm like liquid fire. He screamed, clutching it, but the more he resisted, the more it burned. Heron reached for him. "Let it go, Jungkook. Let it end." He shook his head violently. "If I let go, you'll disappear." Her voice broke. "That's the point." For a moment, silence. Only the wind. Only the sound of two broken souls standing in the memory of flame. Then Jungkook took her hand. It was warm, not ghostly cold, but alive with heat. If I let you go, promise me you'll forgive me. Heron smiled faintly. I already did. The fire surged upward, engulfing them both, not with pain, but with light. It swept through the ruins, the snow, the sky. Every trace of shadow burned away. And in the middle of it all, Jungkook saw not death, but memory, moments flashing like embers. Laughter backstage, Heron's voice blending with his in rehearsal, Seo's quiet nods of pride. Then the last one, Heron looking back before the blast, whispering something he never heard until now. Don't let the fire take you. When Jungkook woke, the infirmary was still. The doctors said he'd been unconscious for 2 days, found collapsed at the ruins, no burns on his body, only a faint scar shaped like a closed flame. Captain Min visited him, holding a small metal case. This was found near you, he said. Inside lay the locket, clean, unburned, the photograph gone. Jungkook stared at it for a long time. She's gone, he whispered. Min looked at him carefully. Who? Jungkook smiled faintly, eyes distant. Someone who stayed too long in the fire. He turned the locket over in his hand. The back was engraved now, faint but clear. You remembered. Months later, Jungkook stood on a small stage at the barracks' farewell ceremony. The winter had softened. The snow no longer burned his skin when it touched him that he sang softly, an old melody, one the others didn't recognize. A song about loss and light and letting go. As he sang, the burn on his hand glowed faintly one last time, then faded completely. When the final note died, he looked at the empty chair in the front row and smiled. The lights dimmed, and somewhere, faint and far away, a woman's voice joined his for the last verse. Two flames, one sky, one burns, one dies, but both remember the fire. The hall fell silent, the world moved on, but in the wind outside, the song lingered, soft, eternal, and free.